Welcome to my channel. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and share. And if you enjoy this story, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a man named Elias. His name was once whispered with awe and fear across the borderlands. He was no ordinary warrior. Elias was a war-born tactician, a master of the blade, a man whose presence on the battlefield turned tides. His enemies knew him as the Wraith of Emberfall, a shadow that struck without warning and vanished just as quickly, leaving silence and severed banners in his wake. Kings courted his loyalty. Soldiers followed him like legend. But Elias fought not for gold or glory. He fought for order, a belief that from chaos peace could be carved. But war, for all its fire, cannot warm a man's heart forever. He lost his wife during a siege. One morning she laughed beside him in their small cottage. By nightfall, flames consumed everything. Elias arrived too late. The fire had taken her. From that day, the fire inside him dimmed. He fought less, drank more. And then, quietly, he disappeared from the army's ranks, taking nothing but his sword and his daughter. Her name was Elyra. In her laughter, he found gentleness. In her wonder, he remembered how to hope. Together, they wandered far from the noise of kingdoms. He traded swordsmanship for poetry, learned to speak with ink instead of steel. The Wraith of Emberfall became a quiet man with kind eyes who wrote verses on river stones and sang to the stars. But fate, ever cruel, came for him again. Elyra fell ill one spring. He tried everything. Herbs, prayers, whispered bargains into the dark. But nothing worked. She died in his arms, her last words soft. "You don't have to fight anymore." He buried her beneath a willow tree and knelt there until the night grew cold. And then one morning, he rose and walked into the forest, bringing no blade, no parchment, only the weight of grief. He wandered until he found a clearing where even the birds refused to sing. At its center stood a massive tree, tall and ancient, its bark gray as ash, its roots twisted like fingers gripping the earth. Elias knelt beneath its shadow. And there, in stillness, he took his own life. He expected nothingness. But what came was not peace. He awoke in darkness. Not the hush of death, but the echoing vastness of something beyond. His soul flickered like fading embers. A voice, cold and eternal, spoke. "You surrendered your fate. You broke the thread before it was spun. Neither realm will claim you." Two gates appeared, one of radiant gold, the other of burning stone. Both remained closed. "You are unworthy of ascent, and unfit for damnation." And then even that faded. Elias fell again, into the veil, a liminal realm for those who gave up too soon. There, his spirit wandered, lost in the gray mists for what felt like eternity, until one day something shifted. The gods, who had not forgotten him entirely, guided his soul. A force pulled him, gentle but absolute. Through the mist a shape emerged. Tree. In the world of the living, it had once stood at the edge of a quiet village. Wide-branched and golden-leaved, it offered beauty and shade. Children played beneath it. Travelers came to see it. The villagers called it the Watcher Tree, a living monument, though it had no magic or power. The tree welcomed Elias. Its roots wrapped gently around his spirit, not to trap him but to give him place. And he did not resist. He let go. His sorrow sank into the roots. His pain soaked the soil. And slowly, the tree began to wither. Its leaves curled and fell. Birds stopped singing in its branches. Children no longer played beneath its shade. What was once a place of life became hushed. The villagers stayed away, whispering that it was cursed. But deep inside Elias slept, until one day footsteps returned. In the kingdom, they also leave a boy called Kale. Kale had known the weight of the world long before his shoulders were grown enough to carry it. His father had died when he was very young, taken by a fever that swept through the village one bitter winter. Since then, Kale had become the quiet strength of his small family, working the fields of others in exchange for coin or bread. He rose with the sun, labored until his limbs ached, then walked home to care for his mother and younger sister. He never complained. But sometimes when the world pressed too hard on his chest, he would walk away from the village, up the narrow forgotten path that wound through the woods and led to the hill. There the tree stood. It was massive, ancient, yet haunting in its silence. Its bark was cracked like old stone. Its branches stretched toward the sky like pleading hands. The villagers no longer spoke of it kindly. They said it had been cursed, that the joy had long left it. But Cale wondered. He had no memory of the tree's golden days. Only stories passed down by old voices. They said it had once been the pride of the land, that birds sang in its limbs, and animals rested beneath it in peace. Travelers from distant places had come to see its beauty. Children laughed and played at its roots. It had been a place of life. Now it looked like a grave. Still Cale came. Not because he believed in the stories, but because something about the tree gave him stillness. When he was too tired to think, he would sit beneath its quiet limbs, watching the sky between its branches. And the more he sat, the more he began to wonder. Why had it dried? What had happened? One afternoon, after a long day in the fields, Cale rested his hand gently on the bark. Felt rough, lifeless, but not hollow. Felt waiting. He frowned, stepping back. The wind stirred faintly. A single leaf, brown and brittle, broke loose and fell to the earth beside him. Cale crouched, touching the leaf. "I don't think you're gone," he whispered, not sure why he said it. Far within the tree, Elias stirred. He had not moved for years. His spirit lay bound in sorrow, fused into the old roots, into the trunk, into the stillness. But Cale's presence, his quiet kindness, his curiosity, his grief, touched something deep inside. It was not enough to awaken Elias. Cale's bond with the watcha tree began to grow stronger in quiet, mysterious ways. Though the tree remained dry and lifeless to the eyes of others, Cale sensed something deeper, something stirring. One night, as Cale slept on the hard mat beside his mother and sister, a strange dream swept through his mind. In it, the watcha tree spoke, not in words but in a deep, aching feeling. "Please give me food. I am hungry," it seemed to say. Cale woke up before dawn, heart pounding. The dream had felt so real. Driven by something he couldn't explain, Cale filled a small calabash with water. He took a piece of bread and a handful of grain. With quiet steps, he walked through the early mist to the watcha tree. Kneeling beside its base, he whispered, "I don't know why, but may God have mercy on you." He poured the water gently at the roots, placed the bread and grain near the base, and stood in silence. The wind barely moved, but Cale felt something shift. Birds, long absent from the tree, landed on its branches. Small animals crept from the forest's edge to eat the grain, something they had not done in years. Each day after that, Cale returned. He brought food and water. He prayed. He spoke softly to the tree, sometimes sharing stories of his struggles or his sister's laughter. He didn't know what he was doing exactly, only that it felt right. And then, one morning, Cale noticed something new. A single green leaf had pushed its way through one of the brittle branches. The next day there were two. A few days later, more leaves followed. Slowly, quietly, the watcha tree had begun to breathe again. Cale smiled and touched the bark. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. He just kept returning, feeding the roots and pouring water, as something ancient and broken began to heal. Cale worked hard in Chief Bentu's fields. He helped harvest yams during the season, lifting baskets with aching arms and muddy hands. The chief was known for owning the largest plot of farmland in the village, and though he paid his workers, his generosity was often thin. Still, Cale said nothing. He needed the money to feed his mother and sister. One morning, after days of heavy harvest, Cale made his way to the chief's compound to collect his wages. The sky was just beginning to turn gold, and the village was quiet. Chief Bentu was in the courtyard, speaking with his eldest son. He glanced at Kale as the boy approached, then frowned. "You again," he muttered. "What do you want?" Kale hesitated. "Sir, I've come to collect the yam harvest wages, for the last 3 days." Bentu waved a dismissive hand. "Come back later. I'm busy." My family needs food," Kale said softly. "Please." The chief's expression hardened. "You think you're the only one with a hungry family. You children think the world owes you something because you know how to dig dirt." Kale lowered his gaze, hands clenched at his sides. "I only ask for what was promised." Bentu stood, stepping close. "Watch your tongue. Be grateful I even let you work my land. Come back tomorrow. If I remember, I'll give you your coin." Kale nodded quietly and turned away, his chest burning, not just from hunger, but from the sharp edge of injustice. For many years, the Watcha tree had stood in silence, forgotten, cracked, and hollow in spirit. Once a beacon of life, it had withered under the weight of a soul tormented. But now things were different. Through Kale's quiet offerings, simple prayers, and sincere kindness, something long buried inside the tree began to awaken, not with pain but with peace. The roots, once brittle and thirsty, stretched deeper into the earth. They found streams of water hidden beneath stone, drinking deeply for the first time in ages. The bark thickened and darkened with strength, and new shoots formed where the branches had once broken. But it was not just the body of the tree that healed, it was its spirit. Elias, bound within, felt something he hadn't felt in years: warmth. The boy's devotion, unasked and pure, soothed the sorrow that had rooted itself deep in his soul. Where once there was regret, there now grew hope. Joy bloomed in the Watcha tree, not loud or sudden, but slow and certain like the morning sun. Birds now sang before dawn, welcoming the day from its branches. Butterflies flitted through the leaves, and deer grazed gently beneath its shade. Kale didn't understand the full mystery of the tree, but he noticed the change. Each time he visited, the branches seemed to reach out farther, leaves whispering above him like a song. One day, as he rested with his back against the trunk, he closed his eyes and smiled. "You're happy now, aren't you?" he whispered. And in the rustling leaves, a breeze swirled gently like laughter. The Watcha tree had finally found joy. And in its joy, it grew stronger than ever. One day, a girl called Talia was walking back from the farm with her mother. The sun was soft in the sky, casting long shadows over the path. As they approached the bend near the old clearing, Talia's eyes, as always, wandered toward the Watcha tree. She didn't see Kale. For weeks, maybe months, she had noticed him there, alone beneath the tree, talking softly, sometimes pouring water or placing bread at its roots. She never asked questions. It was strange but harmless. A boy with a broken look in his eyes, always returning to that dead tree. Only now he wasn't there. Talia slowed her steps, glancing quickly at her mother. "Mama, go ahead. I think I left something." Her mother sighed but nodded, too tired to argue. "Don't be long." As soon as she turned the corner, Talia slipped through the brush and approached the clearing. And then she saw it. The tree, the Watcha tree, was alive. Its bark glistened in the light, and its branches stretched proudly into the air, thick with green leaves. Bright blossoms peeked between them, and birds danced through the limbs. At the base of the tree, animals lay peacefully, some nibbling at scraps of grain, others drinking from a bowl of water. Talia's breath caught in her throat. It was the same tree. The same dry, cracked husk that people used to call cursed, but now pulsed with life. She stepped closer, eyes wide. At the base of the trunk, just as she had guessed, were Kale's offerings: a half loaf of bread, a small jug, and scattered grain. "It was him," she whispered, amazed. The wind stirred. The leaves rustled as if the tree had heard her. And somehow she felt it. This wasn't just nature. Something old, something powerful lived here. She stood silently for a while, her heart pounding, unable to look away. Then she turned and ran to catch up with her mother, her thoughts racing. She had a secret now, and it began with a boy and a tree that had come back to life. Talia couldn't sleep that night. The image of the watcher tree, alive, blooming and full of song, danced behind her eyes. She kept seeing the birds in its branches, the blossoms along its limbs, the peaceful animals resting at its roots. Her heart buzzed with wonder, and the mystery weighed heavy on her young mind. By morning, she couldn't hold it in any longer. As her mother prepared cassava by the fire, Talia hesitated, then blurted out, "Mama, I went to the watcher tree yesterday." Her mother's hands froze. The wooden spoon slipped from her fingers. "I saw something," Talia continued, voice trembling with excitement. "The tree is alive again. It's green, full of leaves and flowers. Birds are singing in it. Mama, I swear it's not dead anymore." But before she could finish, her mother turned sharply, eyes wide with fear. "Stop," she snapped. Talia flinched. Her mother grabbed her by the shoulders, her voice low and firm. "Don't speak of that tree. Not here, not anywhere. You understand me." "But Mama, I saw." "I don't care what you think you saw," her mother hissed. "That tree is cursed. Has been since before you were born. No one goes near it for a reason." "But Kale, Her mother's grip tightened. "Kale is a troubled boy. He lost his father, carries too much weight for someone so young. You leave him and that tree alone." Talia's eyes brimmed with tears, her lips trembling. "But it's not cursed anymore." Her mother shook her head slowly. "Curses don't just lift, Talia. Some things should be left alone. I don't want to hear another word about it. And I forbid you to go near that place again." She turned away and picked up the spoon, returning to her pot as if nothing had been said. Talia stood there in silence, heart pounding, her wonder now tangled with fear. But deep down, she knew what she had seen was real. Later that day, Talia and her mother loaded their baskets with cassava, yams, and groundnuts, then made their way to the village market. The sun was high, and the narrow road bustled with chatter, carts, and traders calling out their wares. Talia kept her head down, still stung by her mother's stern warning. She hadn't spoken a word since the morning. But as they reached the edge of the market, she began to notice something strange. People were talking not about prices, not about rain, but about a tree. "The watcher tree," a young man said, his arms full of firewood. "I saw it myself. Leaves, real ones, green and full. Maybe the gods have blessed it again," said a woman with a basket of peppers. "Blessed?" Another scoffed. "That tree's been cursed for as long as I can remember. How can anything grow from that?" Talia's heart raced. She looked up at her mother, who was frozen in place, her face unreadable. "Some say they saw animals lying under it," an old trader added. "Birds nesting in it again." A few villagers had gathered by a tomato cellar, all murmuring and shaking their heads. "This morning someone saw a child leaving bread and water at the base," one whispered. "They say it's been happening for weeks." Talia's mother gripped her arm tightly and leaned down. "You see," she whispered harshly, "this is how it begins. People talking, stirring trouble." "But Mama, the tree," Talia started. "Not another word," her mother said through clenched teeth. But Talia wasn't the only one listening. More ears caught the whisper. More eyes turned with curiosity. By midday, the whole market buzzed with it. "The cursed tree," they said, "is alive again." Some scoffed, others crossed themselves. But all were intrigued. And far from the noise, on the quiet hill where the watcher tree stood, a breeze passed through its leaves like a sigh. The revival had begun, not just in roots and bark, but in the hearts of people who once feared it. By the next morning, the village was abuzz. Word had traveled fast. What started as whispers in the market had grown into full-fledged gossip, reaching every corner of the village and beyond. The story of the watcher tree's revival spread like wildfire, and people from surrounding villages began to make their way to the clearing. As the sun rose high in the sky, a steady stream of villagers and travelers trickled toward the tree. Talia, walking with her mother to the market again, saw the crowd before they even reached the hill. It was true. The Watcher Tree, once a forsaken relic of desolation, was now the heart of the village. People gathered around its base, marveling at its transformation. Children ran beneath its branches, playing tag and laughing, their voices bright against the chirping of the birds nesting there. Women knelt near the roots, hands gently grazing the leaves, marveling at how soft and green they were. Elders stood in awe, whispering prayers of gratitude, as if the gods themselves had answered their prayers. "I never thought I'd see the day," said an old man, shaking his head in disbelief. "It was dead for so long." "It's a blessing," a woman replied, clutching her child close to her side. "The gods must have heard our pleas." Talia, standing near the edge of the crowd, felt a strange pull in her chest. She had witnessed the tree's revival firsthand, but seeing it now, alive and brimming with energy, felt different. It was like the whole village had come together, sharing in something sacred, something beyond understanding. But there was more to the story than the village realized. The tree had not simply come back to life on its own. There was Kale, the boy who had tended to it, given it his heart and spirit. Yet Kale remained distant from the crowd. He was at the base of the tree as always, but now he simply watched, his eyes distant as if guarding a secret only he understood. The villagers came to him with questions, offering thanks, but Kale only nodded silently. His thoughts were elsewhere, his bond with the tree too deep for words. Still, a quiet smile tugged at his lips, a smile that spoke of his happiness. The tree was alive. He had helped bring it back, and now it was thriving. For Kale, this was more than a triumph. It was a fulfillment of something deep within him. As the day wore on, more people arrived, some from other villages, drawn by the tale of the revived tree. They marveled at the green leaves, the sweet scent in the air, and the peacefulness of the place. There were no longer rumors or fearful glances, only wonder and joy. "This is a miracle," a man said, bowing his head as he stood beneath the tree. "A gift from the gods." Others nodded in agreement, their eyes wide in awe. A sense of unity filled the air, as though the tree's revival had brought the village closer together. For the first time in years there was hope. The Watcher Tree, once a symbol of abandonment, had become a symbol of renewal. Among the growing crowd was Chief Bentu, a powerful man in the village who had always watched Kale with silent disdain. That morning, after seeing the number of people gathered and hearing the stories about Kale's connection to the revived tree, he grew suspicious. Greed and curiosity filled his thoughts. Later that day, as the crowd thinned, Bentu called Kale aside. "Come with me," he said sternly, leading the boy to a shaded spot behind the tree. "What did you do to this tree?" Bentu asked, his tone sharp. "Speak the truth. Did you use magic? Did you do something unnatural?" Kale, though nervous, stood firm. "No, Chief. I only gave it water, bread, and grain. Prayed. That's all. I never used anything else." Bentu's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe the answer, but before he could press further, a small voice interrupted. It was Talia. She had seen Bentu take Kale aside and followed them quietly. Alarmed by the chief's tone, she ran to tell her mother and other nearby villagers. Soon a group of people surrounded them. "Why are you questioning him?" one of them demanded. "He helped the tree. We all saw it," another added. "You should be thanking him." Realizing he was outnumbered and his interrogation exposed, Bentu stepped back. His pride wounded, he turned and left angrily, vowing to keep watch on Kale. The villagers, however, praised Kale openly. His simple acts of kindness, faith, and perseverance had brought life to something they had long given up on. And from that day, the story of Kale and the Watcher Tree spread, not just across the village, but to the surrounding lands. People came from far away to see the miracle for themselves. When the Watcher Tree bloomed again, its branches lush with green and its roots pulsing with life, the heavens stirred. The gods, who had long cast Elias into the silent depths of the tree, took notice. They watched the boy, Kale, and the tender compassion he had shown. No rituals, no sacrifices. Only bread, water, grain, and prayer. It was not power that restored the tree. It was love. It was mercy. And it was enough. Moved by this quiet redemption, the gods turned their gaze to the spirit bound within. Elias. 4 years, he had remained chained deep in the soul of the watcher tree. Silenced, forgotten, buried in sorrow. But now he felt warmth. Not from the sun, but from the heart of a child who had seen worth in something broken. And so the gods, in their silent wisdom, broke the ancient chains. Elias was free. But he did not leave. Though the prison had been lifted, he chose to stay. Not as a cursed soul, not as a man condemned, but as something new, something whole. A guardian. A spirit of quiet watchfulness and peace. The watcher tree, once burdened by grief, now stood taller, stronger. And within it, Elias watched, not as a forgotten man but as its heart. Though Chief Bentu had walked away angrily that day, the revival of the watcher tree lingered in his mind like a shadow. He couldn't ignore the growing number of villagers gathering around it, nor the whispers of Kale's strange connection to it. In his heart, fear took root. What if the tree held real power? And what if that power could be used against him? Determined to find answers, the chief acted in secret. One quiet evening, long after the crowd had left, he summoned a traveling magician he trusted, one known for reading signs and sensing unseen forces. They arrived at the tree under moonlight. The magician circled it slowly, placing his palm on the bark, whispering strange words. He stayed silent for a while, then turned to the chief with a grave face. "Yes," the magician said at last. "This tree holds power. Strong one. But it cannot be taken or used by force. Has already chosen someone. If another tries to control it, punishment will follow." Chief Bentu's face grew pale. "What kind of punishment?" "The kind that never leaves you," the magician replied. "It will consume you from within." The chief stared at the tree, once dry and withered, now strong and alive. A cold wind brushed through the leaves, and for the first time, he felt as if the tree itself was watching him. Without a word he turned away. Fear had rooted itself deeper than greed now. Elias had been given freedom, and in gratitude, he gave back to the world through the tree that once held his sorrow. Soon whispers spread far beyond the village, of a sacred tree that could heal. The watcher tree became known as the healer tree. People came from far and wide to sit beneath it, to lay their hands on its bark, or drink water from the ground near its roots. Diseases began to fade, pain lessened, and even those suffering in silence, trapped in grief, despair, or depression, found peace again. No longer did people take their own lives in hopelessness. The tree had become a sanctuary. And at the heart of it all was Kale. The boy who once worked on farms to feed his mother and sister was now known as the strongest healer in the land. Not because of potions or magic, but because he had a heart that listened and hands that served. He never claimed the tree's power for himself. He simply became its voice and its vessel. Years passed, and Kale's name was spoken with reverence. One day, Chief Bentu returned, not with pride but with fear and desperation. His first son had fallen ill, afflicted by something no other remedy could cure. Swallowing his pride, the chief brought the boy to Kale. He expected rejection. He remembered how he had once treated the boy. But Kale only looked at the child, then at the chief and said, "Bring him under the tree." With the same compassion that revived a cursed soul and healed a broken spirit, Kale tended to the boy. And slowly the watcher tree did the rest. Chief Bentu stood in silence, humbled. This was no ordinary story. This was a story of redemption, not just for Elias but for an entire village. A story of patience, compassion, and love that grew where pain once ruled. And so it ended not with a battle but with healing. The watcher tree stood tall, the wind whispering through its leaves, as Kale rested beneath its shade.